Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. We will be looking at Codex Space Marines for the Long War. So, if you've not checked out the Long War, check out the links in the description below to all the Long War stuff. It's all free, it's all fan-made, it's all subject to fan feedback to make a better Warhammer 40,000 game, the Warhammer 40,000 game you deserve. At the time of recording this, the Long War has almost completed its core codexes, which is very exciting. And this series here on my channel will be going through and giving an overview of Codex Space Marines. We're going to go through the Codex. We're going to go not completely in depth, but as an overview, touching on all the new stuff that's different or unique in the Codex. And we're going to be doing this for a bunch of codexes in the series in no specific order, but starting with, of course, the poster boys of Warhammer 40,000, the Imperial Guard. I kid. Codex Space Marines. Okay, so let's begin with the general outline of what we're talking about here. So Space Marines are what everyone has come to associate, and Long War continues the legacy of the Space Marines in the way that they were always designed to be. And so we're just going to talk about the general design for a moment. So, Space Marines are very easy to play and very forgiving. They are a jack of all trades. They're good at combat, they're good at shooting. They're good for players who are new to Warhammer 40,000, and of course they're good for people who are new to Long War especially. If you're coming into Long War and you are expecting to play something similar to 9th edition, you're going to be way off. If you've played 7th edition and before, this will be like coming home. Now if you're new to it, the Space Marines are where you want to begin because they ease you into a lot of the mechanics of the Long War. The Space Marines have good toughness and high armor saves, which means the army is very forgiving, as we said, and it takes a punch, and it can also give a punch back. Opponents have to drown you in number of shots or bring expensive anti-armor weapons against you if they expect to kill you quickly. Space Marines have a lot of upgrades, they have a lot of war gear, they have a lot of units, they have an obscene level of customization in the army to let it play the way you want. The Space Marines have a tool for everything. The level of customization and fantastic base stats of the Space Marines means they are an elite army, however. The more you go into upgrades and decking out your dudes, the fewer units you will have in total. Your quality of units and adaptability is matched by other armies' access to numbers. Few armies, except for like Craftworld Eldar, other Space Marine armies, and Talons of the Emperor will have fewer models than you. Like, you have to go hyper elite to outnumber to have a Space Marine army outnumbering your opponents. And this can lead to very different kinds of play, where you might play like, for those of you who have followed my channel well, you know, my brother and partner on the channel, T, he has a boys over toys preference when it comes to playing Space Marines, and particularly playing Long War Space Marines. He won't go into the upgrades, he wants variety of just units. Whereas me, I'm all about, give me my units, I'm going to deck them out to do this stuff, I'm going to give them Artificer Armor, all sorts of things, and that is it. Now, next, we'll dive into the Army Special Rules. Okay, so Space Marines Army Special Rules. The Space Marines have their core Army Special Rules, which are fairly simple in the grand concept of the various Army Special Rules that you will see presented throughout the Long War. There are the core rules, which have the core special rules, and all the universal special rules are in the core rules there. And then Army Special Rules are things that are presented elsewhere, and then there are Weapon Special Rules, which are presented elsewhere as well, under specific circumstances. But these are the ones that are unique to your army that apply to units in the Space Marine army. So, the first one is, and they shall know no fear. It is the basic ability on pretty much everything in the Space Marine army. Space Marines, because of their low numbers, really like to play the objective game. They are small elite strike forces that are on the battlefield to accomplish a single objective that can turn the tide. This rule grants Space Marines stubborn while within 6 inches of an objective, and allows you to automatically regroup. Your Marines can auto-regroup at the start of the movement phase, and the stubborn near objective markers makes it harder for you to run away to morale and harder to be suppressed and pinned. Additionally, Primaris Space Marines and they shall know no fear, gain a 5+ feel no pain special rule while they are within 6 inches of an objective, making them harder to shift. So this is one that increases the bravery of your army, makes it harder for people to lock you down, and ensures that your high leadership does its job. Stubborn itself, you can see in the core special rules, means that you ignore modifiers to your leadership, which is really important. So, and They Shall Know No Fear is really good for playing the objective game and rewards you for being on objectives, and then its additional effect is that you can auto-rally so that your guys, even if they retreat or they get panicked, they can get back into the fight later in the game, so that your expensive units aren't just going to keep running off the board. Then there's Angels of Death. Angels of Death is another ability that is almost universally present across the army. For Angels of Death, if you are locked in combat with an enemy unit with a lower leadership characteristic than your Space Marines, your Space Marines gain the Fear 1 special rule, lowering their leadership further, giving the Space Marines a little extra edge to win combat and send enemies scurrying, as hopefully by winning combat and lowering their leadership, you will hopefully, when they make their panic test, force them to panic and cause them to run away. It's simple and circumstantial special rule that can help Space Marines break enemy horde armies that typically outnumber them. Then there's Fury of the Chapter, which is reserved for specific units in the army. Most tactical squads, intercessors, tactical terminators, and other baseline troops have this special rule. The special rule allows the unit to fire 1 additional shot from their bolt weapons if they remain stationary. So at standard range, a bolt gun becomes 2 shots or 3 shots if they're in rapid fire range. It's a decent ability that lets you lay down some more downfield fire from positions of relative safety with your units that are normally used to cap objectives. Then there is the Master of Command and Sub-Commander special rules, which address your HQs. Master of Command basically locks you to a single Space Marine captain of any type. Any Sub-Commanders, and Sub-Commanders lets you bring 2 lieutenants of either variety for every HQ slot. So, in a standard Crusade game, you can have a max of 1 captain and 4 lieutenants. This is really important because of how lieutenants work in the Long War Space Marines, which we'll discuss in a little bit. Then, the final army special rule that they have is combat squads. And this is familiar to pretty much every Space Marine player in existence if you've ever played Space Marines. It has not changed at all in the Long War. It is still divide your units in half if they have the rule. You have the option to do that. So, next, we will talk about war gear. So, Space Marines in the Long War have an absurd amount of war gear. This is the main thing you need to learn, along with your army's special rules, since the Space Marines don't have an abundance of special rules beyond them. Beyond what I've just read out, they don't have a lot in the terms of like having to memorize a lot of things. Some of the more advanced units and more, different unit types have their core rules built into them, their universal special rules that are rather basic to learn. But the war gear is where your brain has to go, and this is the thing that, as a Space Marine player, you're gonna have to get to grips with. Your basic war gear options are exactly what you expect and give a good variety for different tasks. Bionics, storm shields, iron halos, Narthisiums, all of which provide the effects you might think. The Narthisium provides its bearer and any attached unit a 5+ Feel No Pain special rule, which is pretty nice, but it doesn't resurrect models like it does in 9E because that's kind of retarded. Storm shields are still a 4+ invulnerable save, not a 3+ invulnerable save. Digital weapons are another war gear with a change that give you Furious Charge 1, providing an extra attack on the charge. The armor of the Space Marines is detailed and pretty important in the Long War. While they have basics like the Power, the Scout, and the Artificer armors, you have a couple of different other ones. And you got Artificer armor, which is more common and more widespread as an optional upgrade for sergeants, including on Primaris sergeants. This ups the durability of Space Marine units even further. There's Phobos, which is power armor, which gives Infiltrate. There's Gravis, which gives increased toughness, much like in 8th and 9th edition, but doesn't provide any extra wounds or anything. Instead, Gravis is more resistant to blast weapons, reducing the AP of a blast weapon that hits them to better let the Gravis unit advance up the field in the face of artillery or dig in and not die to artillery that shoots it from the backfield while it's trying to cap an objective. There are 3 Terminator armor types: Indomitus, which is the basic all-rounder, Tartarus, which is the fast assault Terminator armor, and Cataphracti, which is the heavy armor with increased protection at the cost of speed. Some of these armors affect the model's move stat and provide a host of special rules. On units that come with these standard, these rules are listed on their sheets, just like most other units. Bikes and jump packs are still what you expect, while jump packs give you some special rules like Deep Strike and Hammer of Wrath for impact attacks. The jump packs also give a flat increase to a model's speed. Bikes do something similar, but also change the equipped model's unit type from infantry to bike type, which brings with it some additional special rules and benefits that are covered in the core rules. A lot of weapons have been improved or streamlined, particularly in the Primaris area. Accelerator autocannons are just replaced with better autocannons in general. In total, weapons have been streamlined, fixing and balanced to try and make sure that each weapon is viable in its own right. And there's a reduced redundancy on, it's this kind of pattern weapon that has this slightly different stat thing. No. It's an autocannon. It does autocannon things. Shotguns are now worth taking since they have assault as their basic type, and they allow a unit to charge, but also after firing, unlike bolt guns, but they are also concussive, allowing them to lower the target's initiative to 1 before they fight, making them very good versus fast, high-initiative, close combat armies. Bolt sniper rifles have been massively streamlined into something simple that does excellent work on the battlefield, giving an upgrade over regular sniper rifles, which are easy to mass field, but not as deadly efficient. Flame weapons have had a massive change in the Long War in general, and are now Horde Killers Supreme. Flame weapons are very powerful for Space Marine armies, and in general, due to the nature of Long War, a single specialist weapon can make all the difference in the world. At the same time, a lot of weapons introduced in 8E and 9E with an absurd number of shots at high strength, such as onslaught cannons, were nerfed and balanced to complement older weapons better rather than flat out replacing them. Missile weapons are stronger, but require a weight of numbers to really take down tanks compared to melter weapons and las weapons, which can pop them with a very lucky shot. Most weapons have had their AP reduced or retranslated, and changes to vehicles in Long War means that anti-tank weapons are needed and powerful, but it's no good really spamming them anymore. Grav has seen a change that makes it a very middle-of-the-road weapon, effective against all targets. Power weapons have received much needed love, and each now has its own purpose. Swords are now a valid choice, and so are mauls. Hammers are great against monsters and infantry, but not as powerful versus tanks. Fists are strong versus vehicles, but not so much against multi-wound monsters. There is no damage characteristic in Long War, and few weapons deal multiple damage. This means weapon selection is very important, and target priority is more important and meaningful than ever. Force weapons are a jack of all trade that are reliable at the cost of killing power. Plasma weapons cannot be overcharged and still gets hot, but gets hot as a special rule is more forgiving, since you always get your armor save against it. This favors Space Marines heavily since they have a 3+ armor save. Plasma are a perfect anti-marine weapon, and great against heavy infantry, but carry some danger. Basic chainswords have received a buff by now being AP 5 and having shred, much like in Horus Heresy. Combi weapons are strong, but suffer from limited ammo. 2 shots on non-bolt weapons means you get 2 rounds of using your combi. So, more than enough to turn the tide in the Long War, but limited to prevent them from outstaying their welcome. Okay, moving further away from the war gear now, we're going to dive into some of the chunky goodness of the Codex. Warlord traits, psychic powers, litanies, and machine rights, and upgrades. So, starting with Warlord traits, Space Marines in Long War have 3 basic Warlord traits. The first, the Sword of Imperium, is a straight-up damage multiplier, increasing your Warlord's killing power. The second is a Warlord trait that helps prepare for battle by increasing the number of specialist slots in your detachment. Letting you take additional elite, fast, or heavy choices is great for Space Marines who have a huge number of units to pick from. The third Warlord trait, Storm of Fire, is a single unit buff once per game that, if timed right, can devastate an enemy unit and potentially win you the game. It gives the entire unit Rending 5+. This is great, and it lasts for the whole phase. So depending on your playstyle, the 3 basic abilities serve your army in different ways. Then you have Psychic Powers. So Space Marines' Psychic Powers now only encompass 3 basic powers plus the Smite power found in the core rules. Each of these are designed to function in a different phase and work with the cycle rules of Long War, which are very different from all the editions of Warhammer. A Psyker knows all of these, giving them versatility, but their mastery level dictates how many they can cast per turn. That's per player turn. So you can also cast these in your opponent's turn, which is important. Veil of Time is a mobility increase for the Psyker and their attached squad. Psychic Barrier lets the Psyker shield their attached squad with an invul save, and Might of Heroes transforms the Psyker from a decent fighter by Space Marine standards to a man who can really get things done. Psychic powers, if you intend to cast them, have to be done at the start of the phase before either player does anything, so you have to be on the ball when using Psykers and really thinking ahead. Then you have Litanies. Litanies are prayers that are less dangerous psychic powers. They are weaker in power, but don't inflict any perils if you fail the test to cast them. These prayers allow your chaplain to assist units they are attached to with anything from basic rerolls, extra denial on psychic powers, moving with heavy weapons unimpeded. They work in much the same way as psychic powers, chanted at the start of the phase. However, they are always limited to once per turn. While a priest knows all 3, you have to pick carefully. There's no mastery level like there is with Psykers, where mastery level 2 Psykers can cast 2 per turn. Then you have Machine Rites. Much like the Litanies, except these are prayers for machines done by tech priests. These specifically buff walkers, automata, and vehicles. Tech priests are the ones who chant these, and they are mostly very short-ranged, requiring you to either be attached or within 3 inches. Tech priests know all 3 machine rites in the book, just like psychic powers and litanies, and they allow you to protect a vehicle better with an invul, detonate a vehicle at your will, or walker, or repair damaged vehicles or walkers by restoring systems or wounds. Then you have the Space Marine upgrades. Upgrades are a huge part of the Space Marines compared to any other faction. Each unit can only purchase 1 upgrade, so you can't stack them up on a unit, so you're going to have to pick carefully. There are 9 upgrades in total for the Space Marine Captain, which allow a huge amount of customization on your Captain. They can turn him into a mini chaplain, they can make him an assassin, let him carry a heavy weapon, upgrade him to the standard chapter master, or allow him to call in extra orbital bombardments. However, these upgrades are important because of their interaction with LTs. In Long War Space Marines, LTs are upgraded into your specialist upgrades through the upgrades section. To get a librarian, ancient, champion, tech priest, chaplain, etc., you must take a lieutenant and upgrade them. There are a lot of upgrades for lieutenants in the book that cover all sorts of ways to field lieutenants. Some of these were specifically designed to make certain builds of particular Primaris models actually worth fielding, such as Lieutenant in Phobos with just a knife. In this example, the Reaver Commander was made to represent him and improves the Lieutenant as a buffing machine for Reavers and makes him a mini Terror Trooper. There are a large number of upgrades that I kind of lost count when I was counting them up. There's about a few. Next, we go into Rites of War. And this is the last bit before we hit the units. Rites of War are How you alter your force organization chart. All armies in Long War use the same force organization chart based on what kind of mission you are playing. The basic is the Crusade force organization chart, found in the core rules. The Rites of War allow you to alter the way you field your army to run a particular narrative theme. All you have to do is obey the restrictions of the rite, and you get its benefits. There are 3 basic rites in the Long War Space Marines Codex. There's Drop Pod Assault, which grants your classic first turn deep strike shenanigans, but limits your heavy firepower and requires you to have a fast mobile army loaded with drop troops, drop pods, or using jump packs. It gives you benefits of also making things like Assault Marines a troops choice. The Mechanized Rite of War lets you field an armored spearhead of tanks supported by infantry. It allows you to field more tanks and land raiders and grants you a tank commander who can either be a predator tank or a gladiator tank. The Pride of the Chapter is an elite rite of war. It allows you to bring veterans and terminators as the core of your army, but you have to bring them and only them. And if your warlord dies, who is at the center of this elite force, you can potentially lose, well, you do lose D3 victory points at the end of the game, meaning losing your warlord can potentially cost you the entire game. So high risk, high reward on that rite of war. And I could talk more in depth about all of these, but all of these are free. You can go read them right now. But I'm going to continue on, and we're going to go and start going through the Space Marines units, because there are a lot of them. So, diving into the unit section for the Space Marines. The Space Marines HQ section is close to what you might expect. It features various types of captains and lieutenants who you may take. Certain kinds of captains and lieutenants have different upgrade options and different war gear options. You also have the Universal Buffing Machine and Artillery Calldown HQ. That is the Damocles Command Rhino to spice things up. So, you have the Space Marine Captain Terminator Armor, Space Marine Captain on Bike, Primaris Captain Phobos, Primaris Captain Gravis, Lieutenant, Primaris Lieutenant, Damocles Command Rhino. The Troops section next. Your troops are the core of your army, but each work now to do something a little bit different. All the options you expect are here from the newer editions. Starting with your scouts, they're light, versatile infiltration and recon units that can be loaded out for a number of tasks. They have worse base stats than basic Marines, but are cheap. Comparatively, though, these guys are what most other factions' elite infantry look like. So, picture that. Your worst dudes are the equivalent of other factions' great units. Like, they're elite veterans in some cases. So, the best of what the regular human forces are on par with these guys, and the scouts still have their increased strength and toughness of being Space Marines. Tactical squads are the classic all-rounder of the Space Marines. Very effective in long war due to the number of options available to them. A single heavy or specialist weapon means in long war, and with combat squads, they can really get work done. These tacticals excel at any task and should be the base of any army. They carry weapons tailored to any target, which is very important. You've got intercessors, which are the objective-holding Space Marines. Primaris units do not have any benefits over regular Firstborn Space Marine units in the Long War, with the exception of a Feel No Pain on objectives from And They Shall Know No Fear. Intercessors separate themselves from tacticals by being exclusively anti-infantry. They are not good at dealing with anything else. The Sarge can take some melee weapons and a plasma weapon, but all their bolt weapon loadouts, and they're all bolt weapon loadouts, because every man in the squad has to have a bolter of some kind, can't deal with anything beyond basic infantry, bikes, and heavy cavalry. Like, they're not going to do good work against monsters, they're not going to do good work against walkers or automata. They're going to do nothing against vehicles unless they can shoot a really weak vehicle in the rear armor. They're only going to chip things that aren't infantry. Then you have Gravis Intercessors, which act much like regular intercessors, but their armaments let them deal with heavy infantry a little bit better. and their armor itself allows them to weather enemy artillery attacks better than their peers, which is a fundamental weakness of Space Marines. They are slow, so they need to be used to either slowly take ground behind assault units or dig in and hold deployment zones. Assault intercessors are intercessors dedicated to killing light infantry, but in melee instead of at range. They're good units to attach the powerful melee beatstick characters of the Space Marines to. They face many of the main problems of intercessors though. The tacticals like the midfield, where they can respond to anything, tactical intercessors like the backfield, where they can camp on objectives and provide some support fire against infantry, and assault intercessors like the front, where they can assault and take objectives from enemy light infantry. Then you've got infiltrators, who are the early game objective grabbers. These guys, much like intercessors, are anti-light infantry and lack any ability to reliably take on anything else, but are able to be set up with infiltrate in key spots early. Their Narthisium war gear and loadout make them geared towards denying objectives in the midfield early on, but need support from tacticals to survive enemy hitters in late game. Incursions, these are Phobos troopers dedicated to super early game harassment. They infiltrate in and take on the enemy, attempting to tie them up and distract them in their deployment zone. While they are very much anti-light infantry as well, infantry are key units in the Long War and these also provide a great distraction. The Haywire Mine they can buy also lets them try to lay some early damage on vehicles and walkers. So while Incursors and Infiltrators behave similarly, they are also different in the fact that Infiltrators act as pseudo-marksmen who support the more aggressive Incursors. Next we have the Elite section, and the Elite section is where the majority of the Space Marine power is. And we start right with that, with Tactical Terminators, which provide a version of Tactical Marines as super heavy infantry equivalent. Terminators are nearly immovable except under weight of fire of low-grade enemy attacks or dedicated anti-tank guns. It takes a lot to beat these guys into the ground. Terminators provide so much durability in Long War that it's crazy, but you do pay the points for that. Combined with a variable loadout, decent ranged weapon, and decent melee weaponry, deep strike deployment options, and a base invulnerable save, Terminators are fantastic. Not only that, as veterans, they have better stats than normal Marines with extra attack, extra leadership, and extra wounds. So each Terminator is basically a mini character on par with a Lieutenant. Assault Terminators are just like the Tactical Terminators, but geared for melee. They carry Thunder Hammers and Storm Shields, which make them super hard to shift off the board. The hammers are great versus monsters and slowly bashing in tanks, while the double Lightning Claw configuration gives them 4 attacks base with 5 on the charge. Combined with Shred special rule, they blend any light, medium, or heavy infantry that they come across, which is fantastic. Their only weakness is other super heavy infantry, like Terminators or things with 2+ saves. Tartaros and Cataphractic Terminators are different options, and they're different kinds of Terminators. They are limited due to their rarity and age in Long War, but provide more customization than standard Terminator units with access to unique weaponry, mix and match options that can provide mid-ground between the 2 basic Terminator types. Assault Centurions are a unit that is super heavy infantry, very slow, multiple wounds, almost on par with a mini monster. They can fire all their weapons and still charge. The assault variants, in particular, are loaded with anti-horde and anti-light infantry weapons by base, but their drills are made for tearing down fortifications and super heavies. Next you've got the Blade Guard. Blade Guard are elite melee unit that is small in number. They come loaded with veteran stats, relic shields, relic blades, which are amazing weapons, for killing super heavy infantry, and weapon skill 5, which is very important in the Long War, making them one of the reliable hitters who are also able to mitigate a fair amount of melee hits headed back at them. These guys are elite melee fighters, perfect for taking on other veterans. Then you have your Stern Guard and Vanguard veterans. These are elite versions of tactical and assault marines that take the concepts of those squads and bring them veteran stats and even more upgrades and options to deal with literally anything. These units can be customized to plug any hole in your army, essentially. Then you have Reavers. Now, Reavers have long been a joke in Warhammer 40,000, but Reavers in the Long War do serve a purpose and are viable. Reavers have they're an infiltration unit equipped with anti-light weapons. Their rules allow them to support other units well in the assault with their shock grenades, locking down targets with these grenades by blinding them, stopping the foe's ability to hit back in melee effectively. Their fear also affects every enemy within 12 inches. So, this is an excellent support unit that primarily serves to pick off chaff while supporting other heavier assault units, and it does this while being reasonably cheap as well. Additionally, they make a number of additional attacks that let them throw out a huge number of attacks in close combat. Now, while the close combat weapons aren't super impressive, they serve to clear out the chaff. With Sunstrike 1, they can also strike at Initiative 5, so they are perfect for killing those light infantry, while also throwing shock grenades that will screw up a hyper elite unit that could potentially murder them or one of your more important units. Then you have aggressors. Now these are Gravis units designed to go on the offensive as per their name. With Gravis armor, they can resist being blasted away by artillery. They have two different armaments, which allow them to do two different things. Their gauntlets with bolt weapons and fragstorm grenade launchers let them deal with light infantry units until you reach melee. With the flame gauntlets, letting you eliminate entire light infantry units in a single round. The aggressors excel at moving to a position and holding it, which is where these two weapons come in handy. The bolt weapons are better for simply reaching the point and staying there to shell anything that dares come near you, where the flame weapons are better at carrying the fight forward and continuing on. Their overwatch is incredible, and they can deny entire areas of the battlefield. Their fists, as a melee weapon, also make them a force to be reckoned with, which, provided they survive, since they strike Initiative 1, can wreck a lot of things. Then you have Eliminators. Eliminators are the super elite snipers. While the scout squad loaded with sniper rifles can lay down a lot of precision shots, the Eliminators sniper, with their bolt sniper rifles, is deadly efficient. With las fusils, they can tear down heavy armor and harm vehicles as well as a mini Devastator squad, if you need that. Their Phobos armor lets them get into great position at the beginning of the game, and their camo cloaks give them decent protection against anti-armor weapons that normally would, what you would use to remove these guys from their entrenched positions. They're really good assassins. Dreadnoughts come in a variety of flavors. Dreadnoughts are walker types, meaning basically they are monsters, but with relentless instead of regeneration. They all have a 2+ armor save, and anywhere between 4 to 7 wounds depending on the variant. The Dreadnought is a heavy weapons platform between infantry and vehicles that support Space Marine armies well. The basic model serves to be an all-rounder with the most varied loadout for weapons for every enemy type. The Contemptor is more durable but has slightly fewer options. The Redemptor has the least options and is basically geared towards being either anti-super heavy infantry or anti-light infantry. The Invicta Tactical Warsuit, I'm treating as a Dreadnought for the purposes of me writing this and talking about this, because it essentially behaves like one, but we all know it's not one, is a capable scouting walker unit that you have that can get up the board further and supported, and its loadout doesn't make it particularly good at any one thing. It's a bit of a platypus, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Next, we're going to dive into the dedicated transports. So, an important thing to note about dedicated transports in Long War is that you can have a max of 10 in a Crusade detachment, and there is no distinction between Primaris transports. Primaris are not restricted to impulsors. Primaris can use drop pods, rhinos, razorbacks. There is no distinction in the Long War between Primaris and non-Primaris outside of the "and they shall know no fear" special rule, even in their stat lines. The only difference is their war gear. Vehicles are also much more expensive in the Long War. This is because vehicles in the Long War are much more durable against lighter weapons, and you have to be incredibly lucky or unlucky for one of these things to be plinked to death. So, talk about these dedicated transports a bit more. You got the Rhino, which carries 11 models and is fairly durable. They come base in the Long War with storm bolters for protection, so they're not completely unarmed. With their armor, only their rear armor facing is capable of being harmed by Strength 4 weapons. Strength 3 weapons can't hurt these things at all. The Rhino is reliable and has a number of basic uses in the way that vehicles can be used and always have been used in 40k games. Blocking, transport, ramming things, shielding units behind them, all the usual things. The Razorback is a Rhino with increased firepower that can carry only 6 infantry models, but it can also provide fire support. It can be fitted with linked weapons, which are reliable versions of various weapons. And you have anti-tank options, such as las cannons, or heavy bolters, or assault cannons, depending on what you particularly need and how expensive you want this vehicle to be. The Land Raider Storm, or the Land Speeder Storm, is a cavalry unit. It doesn't have armor facings, but it does have wound and saves. It can only carry scouts, but it's an assault vehicle, which allows the unit inside to shoot and fight from within it, albeit at a reduced capacity. So you can have scout units fight from within the safety of the Land Speeder Storm until it's damaged or the scouts need to be unloaded to deliver their full hitting power. The Storm can also outflank from reserves. Drop pods are expensive, but allow you to drop units down from orbit in turn 1 reliably wherever you want. That is powerful. That is also going to cost you points. These things are not 35 points. They are 100 points. Currently, at the time of me writing this. So, they provide limited support with their weapons, but they can also work as shields against enemy units, and the power of accurate deep strikes is not to be disregarded. The Impulsor is much like a Razorback. It has a number of support weapons for going on the attack. It has good front and side armor, not so great rear armor, but it's an assault transport, which means the unit embarked can fight from within the vehicle at a reduced capacity until it's time to exit. This means while it can only carry 6 models, the 6 it carries can still contribute to the fight. The Impulsor also has options for an invulnerable save, additional weapons, and the ability to call down orbital bombardment if you need it. Like most Primaris things, it's a bit of a platypus, but platypuses are not terrible in the Long War, since they give you versatility and variety to be able to go into a situation where you haven't predicted something will come up, and be able to adapt with it because you potentially have the tool to deal with it. So, Flyers next. Flyers are in a place in Long War where the number you can have is really limited. They behave like a vehicle, they are their own unit type, but they're not relentless base, which means scoring hits with them can be difficult if they don't have the hover special rule. And so those that don't have the hover special rule must always be on the move. However, They also pack a high number of heavy weapons, which means even if they happen to strafe something and get some lucky hits, it's gonna hurt. So, typically, flyers that are like that, however, are designed to be hunting other flyers, so they have specific rules about firing at their full ballistic skill as being an aircraft type against other enemy units that have the fly keyword. So, talk about these a little bit in depth. The Stormhawk Interceptor is the dedicated anti-flyer. It's designed around killing other enemy flyers. It's highly specialized. It doesn't have hover, which means it's largely ineffective against ground targets. It does pack a number of heavy weapons that can deal some damage on a lucky hit, but it's primarily designed for taking down other enemy aircraft. So if you bring this thing to a game and expect it to do a bunch of work and kill a bunch of vehicles, you're really overestimating this flyer, because it is moving at super fast speeds, swooping over the battlefield, and not all of its bullets are going to hit. Whereas the other hand, the Storm Talon gunship is designed to strike ground targets. It is able to hover in place to steady its aim, so it can unleash its heavy weapons, which can deal with armor and infantry as well. It's got a decent options for loadout, and overall, how this thing kind of behaves is it's excellent as an aircraft to be able to move up, get into a position, hover in a place, get some shots off, and then move back to another position. But using flyers also requires a lot of forethought because of how they have to move. Then you have the Storm Raven gunship, which is basically a flying Land Raider. It's able to hover in order to deliver its firepower, which is quite extensive. It acts as a transport, including transporting a dreadnought, and can move fairly fast. The Storm Raven is also very durable, with high armor for a flyer. So it's not as likely to get plinked out of the sky by some anti-air weapons. So, then we go into Fast Attack. The Space Marine Fast Attack is divided between jump infantry, bikes, and cavalry units, who provide very swift attack elements. Bike squads are tacticals on bikes. The extra movement and durability from being on a bike makes them very solid and and they're perfect for a midfield unit that can respond to various threats. They have a good number of options, just like the tacticals, and their mobility is great. Being a bike means they can shoot and charge from being relentless. They can outflank from reserves to attack from unexpected angles as well. They're a very good, reliable unit. Scout bikes offer much the same at a reduced cost. They have access to some different war gear, and the Scout Special Rule, which lets them get some pre-game movement early on. They're not as durable, but they still benefit from the bike's enhancements. Their grenade launcher offers some considerable firepower against heavy infantry when needed. Attack bikes are cheap, single-model units, equipped with a small heavy weapon and a basic weapon. They are good mobile harassment units. The stock heavy bolter, they can lay down some suppressing fire and try and get some pinning tests off on some enemies and chip away at enemy infantry relatively well, while the multi-melter is great for attempting to pop enemy tanks and melt chunks out of walkers and monsters. They're very good, very cheap harassment units, as said. Then you've got the Outriders, which are more aggressive bike units and act much like a mix of intercessors and assault intercessors. Much like the regular bike squadron, they have all the benefits of being bikes, but they're restricted to an assault role against light infantry. This makes them good at being assault skirmishers, as opposed to the scout bikers being more ranged skirmishers. Assault Marines are fast attack Marines that are geared towards eliminating specific targets, using their jump pack, specialist weapons, sergeants, weapons, and speed. They can swing into melee and tie up enemies and punch holes in enemy battle lines. With appropriate upgrades, they can be a very aggressive unit with which to strike a killing blow to an enemy or delay them for the heavy elite units in your army to finish the job. Inceptors are mobile fire support. They have Gravis armor to protect them from blast weapons and gives them the increased toughness. The jump packs give them mobility, and their weapons allow them to throw down a lot of firepower that can tear enemy infantry to pieces, or be swapped out for plasma weapons that can tear through super heavy infantry, as well as rip out chunks of walkers and monsters. Suppressors have received the benefits of the autocannon buff. They don't have accelerator autocannons, they have autocannons. Just autocannons, but that's all they need. They pack jump packs and heavy weapons, so while they suffer from the penalties of moving and firing heavy weapons, they can use their jump packs to reach positions from which they can raid down powerful mid-level fire effective against all targets. In certain allegiances, these units are great, but even base, while they have the drawback, they are effective mobile fire support because of just how reliable the autocannon is as an all-rounder weapon against every single target. And they're relatively greatly costed, so making them a pretty good choice. Invader ATVs serve as bigger and more aggressive versions of the attack bike. They come with similar weapon setups, but can take more of a beating with more wounds. Where the attack bike skirmishes and harasses, the ATV is more of a full assault vehicle that takes on enemies directly with its firepower, supporting other squads of faster units. Land speeders are cavalry units. They act like mini monsters that move fast. With 3 wounds and toughness 5, they carry heavy weapons and serve as small mobile heavy weapon teams. They don't have a lot of frills, and what separates them from the ATV is their ability to fly and their capability to carry a greater variety of heavy weapons, such as assault cannons and missile launchers, letting them hunt different targets. Storm speeders are the upgraded, heavier version of the land speeder that act like light tank equivalents for the Space Marines. They take the fast-moving cavalry unit of land speeders and increase the weapons and the durability. The storm speeders can be set up with an array of weapons for whatever task. Unlike in 9E, you do not have to build them in set configurations. Rather, in Long War, you can mix and match the weapons at your leisure, though all the standard configurations are supported. They have some unique weapons, including the powerful Melter Destroyer, which is absolutely monstrous. Between the land speeders, which can do serious work and act as support vehicles, much like faster dreadnoughts, and the storm speeders, your fast attack choices can make cheaper substitutes for your heavy armor forces. The benefits of being cavalry over vehicles means that they can outflank, they can advance and charge, and they can shoot and charge, meaning they are very mobile, and they can strike from various different angles with their mobility. They are able to take action in every phase and can tie stuff up very well, and the ability to fly on some units should not be underestimated. Now, we have the heavy support, the big guns. Beginning with your Devastators. Devastators are the classic heavy weapon squad. Well, basic math will tell you that no matter the addition, running them all with the same basic loadout is the best guarantee to kill a target of choice. You are punished less in Long War for divvying up various weapons to the individual unit, to the individual models. The Marines are only basic Marines with all that entails, but they have the largest weapon selection. Plasma cannons will roast Marine equivalents and Terminator equivalents. Heavy bolters slaughter infantry. Rockets have a good balance between anti-infantry and anti-tank. Heavy flamers delete hordes at close range. Grav cannons are a halfway point between a rocket launcher and a heavy bolter that can kill monsters and cavalry more effectively. Las cannons blast away armor, and multi-melters deal with any super heavy armor you might encounter. The fact that units may split fire in Long War freely helps you if you want to split the weapons up in the squad and run a little bit of everything. Hellblasters are basic Marines loaded with a number of different plasma weapons. The choice of plasma weapon is mainly for deciding how you want to kill a Terminator equivalent or Marine equivalent. They can't bring the level of pain that Devastators can, but they can do good work for their price point. While Plasma may be deadly to the user, their 3+ armor save and feel no pain from being near an objective as a Primaris can help mitigate those casualties, if you're serious about running them. Eradicators are a Gravis melter unit. Their melter rifle is a little longer range than the standard melter gun, and does everything a melter is designed to do everywhere else. The unit serves as a spearhead unit. It's designed to take the fire of bombardments with Gravis and use the melter guns to tear through heavy armor at close range. This makes them the perfect unit to run with aggressors who are dedicated to killing all infantry. These guys eliminate heavy armor vehicles and big units. The aggressors that move with them are great at taking out enemy infantry that might clog up or threaten the Eradicators. Devastator Centurions are heavy weapon platforms. While they have multiple wounds on the level of a mini monster or a character and pack a 2+ armor save, they do lack movement. This makes them best deployed defensively or using transports. They have an impressive array of weaponry. Heavy bolters, grav, missiles. It means they can be set to deal with a large variety of different threats or strike a balance. They do have a weakness in that they cannot fire all of their weapons at once, so you do need to consider carefully how you will use them and distribute their firepower. With no invul save as well, Centurions are huge beneficiaries of cover to help protect them from plasma equivalent weapons. However, they are relentless, so they can move, shoot, and still declare a charge while firing at full ballistic skill with their heavy weapons. And their sergeants allow the unit to ignore cover. This is especially powerful given the changes in Long War's cover system compared to 8th edition, 9th edition, and even 7th and 6th edition. Then, we have the Fire Strike Servo Turret. This is a hovering heavy weapons platform that can displace. It's rather effective unit that, despite not being a character, can attach to other infantry type units and accompany them. In exchange, it receives protection by embedding in the unit, where the unit it embeds in receives the additional firepower of the turret. The turret has a linked autocannon, which is fantastic all-rounder weapon, as we've already talked about. Autocannons are fantastic. Or it can take a linked las talon to deal with encroaching enemy armor. Paired with tacticals, or tactical intercessors, it can add much more fire to the unit. However, it also pairs well with Centurions, Scouts, and all sorts of other units that it can attach to as if it were a character. The Predator tank, and now we hit the tanks. The Predator tank is a classic. By comparison to many tanks, it's more of a fast and nimble light tank, or medium tank at best. But it's very much the main battle tank in the Space Marines. Its loadout starts with a all-round flexible loadout, which also improves its durability. The most common result on a vehicle damaged roll is a weapon destroyed. Beginning with a Storm Bolter, 2 sponsons heavy bolters, and its autocannons, it can lay down an impressive amount of pinning tests, and force a number of pin markers to go on targets. It can also exchange its weapons out for las cannons or linked las cannons for better anti-armor. While the autocannon is not terrible against armor targets, it does suffer against heavily armored targets by not being able to pop them with a single lucky shot, and instead you have to rely on weight of fire to cripple an enemy tank and leave it a wreck. Against high AV armor, it also needs the autocannon's rending. However, at 3 shots, the autocannon is better against monsters, marine equivalents, Terminator equivalents, than the las cannons. So, the Predator, great tank, great unit. The Vindicator is your siege tank. No frills, no thick and crazy, it's a Demolisher cannon on treads, which is already amazing. The Demolisher cannon can instant death most infantry units, and will punch a hole in any building or vehicle that it gets close enough to. The Demolisher cannon deals good damage to everything, but it's not the best weapon for dealing with multi-wound targets if it can't instant death them, such as walkers, monsters, and certain cavalry. It also doesn't carry a high number of weapons, which means it's possible to quickly have the tank lose its main gun. In this case, the tank is still a good defensive platform to shield your other units behind it with its high AV. The Whirlwind is an artillery support tank. Mobile artillery. It only has a single profile compared to other editions versions, so it's got a streamlined missile launcher, regardless of what you model it with, intended to take on specific targets, mostly guard equivalent and marine equivalent. However, it can also deal solid, if unreliable, damage to all targets. The Hunter is a specialized anti-air tank. It's another support tank that, while vulnerable to having its weapons disabled, its main gun is extremely deadly. While it's designed for killing air units, it makes it for a makeshift artillery unit in a pinch, with its missile, which has seen a much improved upgrade over its versions in past editions. The Stalker is the last of the support tanks. It's another anti-air unit, technically, this time loaded with 2 linked Icarus autocannons. Autocannons, as we've already established, are a great weapon, but the Stalker has 2 of them that are linked, so they can re-roll their to-hit rolls, and they have Skyfire, so they hit flyers and aircraft at full ballistic skill. While the Hunter may kill a flyer in 1 to 2 hits, the Stalker can shred them or any unlucky infantry that it comes across. And boy, is the Stalker good at killing stuff with its many autocannon shots. The Gladiator is a medium tank to the Predator tank, or if you consider the Predator tank more of a medium tank, the Gladiator is your next step up as a heavy tank. But not in the realm of super heavies that we're going to get to. It's slightly bigger than a Predator tank, up-armed with more weapons. The Gladiator does not have a set configuration, so you can mix and match the weapons as you see fit, unlike the 9E. Again, all the set configurations are supported though. Gladiator has a long-range laser destroyer for killing super heavy armor, a linked Las Talon option for the short-ranged armor hunting fights that go well with its melter options for when you need to get close, or its Gatling options for shredding hordes of guard equivalents that you prefer dead before you get into flamer distance. The Gladiator also has a small special rule from its repulse field that makes it harder to catch in melee for a little extra protection against particular units that might all be armed with power fists or melee weapons designed exclusively for punching a tank to death. Then, we reach the iconic, the supreme, the undeniable king. The classic Land Raider comes in 3 different flavors. The standard Mars pattern, the Crusader pattern, which carries more troops and extra anti-infantry weapons, or the Redeemer, which burns everything in its path. The Land Raider has become a joke in recent editions of Warhammer 40,000, but in Long War, it is a fearsome beast. Its high armor value means it's all but impenetrable to anything that is not strength 10 on an average dice roll, and you need strength 8 weapons to even scratch the thing. Strength 7 with a rending. Land Raiders also pack good heavy weapons on the base model, and more specialized weapons on its variants. The Land Raider can always overwatch as well, which makes charging it a terrifying prospect no matter the variant. The Land Raider is the king of heavy vehicles once again in the Long War. If you want something stronger, it's time to go to the super heavy vehicles in Long War and Lords of War choices. But we're not done with the heavy support choice yet. We then have the Repulsor. The Repulsor is the Primaris pretender to the Land Raider's throne. The Repulsor, when it first came out, sold itself on being a more upgunned Land Raider that could carry Primaris as one of their 2 transports, seeking to usurp the beloved Land Raider. In Long War, both of those things that made it sell don't matter. The Repulsor and the Repulsor Executioner have weaker side and rear armor compared to the Land Raider, so they are not as resistant to weapons fire. Repulsors can carry any kind of infantry, and the same with Land Raiders, Primaris or not. The Land Raider, however, is an assault tank. It is designed to storm ahead. The selling point of the Repulsor now is that it is a more long-ranged weapon compared to the Land Raider. Take the Land Raider if you intend to get close and need a delivery system for Terminators. The Repulsor and its weapons are more standoff and shoot, ferrying units to objectives in the mid-ground and rear ground, and then providing support fire. The Executioner version is more so with its extremely powerful heavy main guns, which are designed to bring down anything that would challenge a Land Raider. The Repulsor and Land Raider are now friends and partners. The Repulsor protects the rear line, while the Land Raider takes the fight to the enemy. The Deredeo is our last heavy support choice. It is a Contemptor Dreadnought, essentially, with a unique array of heavy weapons in the heavy support slot. You are limited to one, like the Land Raider and Repulsor, so they cannot be spammed outside of specific rights of war. The Deredeo holds some really unique and niche weapons that may suit certain armies and fulfills a dedicated shooting dreadnought role for those who feel the standard dreadnoughts might not cut it for their preferred tactics. And at last we arrive at the Lords of War. So, the Lords of War for the Space Marines is only a small section, but it's a powerful section. All Lords of War are limited to one per army, either through their own rules or by the fact that the Crusade detachment only allows one Lord of War slot. Your first Lord of War choice is the Spartan. The Super Land Raider itself. Everything that applies to the Land Raider applies here. The main thing that separates the Spartan from a Land Raider, aside from the obvious things like transport capacity and weapons, is the fact that it's a vehicle with the Super Heavy 2 special rule. For the Spartan to be destroyed, it must suffer a destroyed result 3 times in one game. The Super Heavy rule gives the Spartan 2 structure points. Once one of these is removed each time the unit suffers a destroyed or crippled result, and instead the vehicle is not destroyed or crippled. The next destroyed or crippled result after the last structure point is lost sticks and the vehicle is down for good. This means you essentially have to kill the vehicle 3 times. The only way around this is using a macro weapon, which are found on things specifically designed to kill super heavies. The Leviathan is the cheaper Lord of War option for Marines. It's not super heavy, but it's the most durable dreadnought in the Codex that matches up against some of the biggest walkers and monsters in the game, outside of the few that step into the Titanic scale. The Leviathan is no slouch in killing power either. All of its weapons are unique to it, and each is designed to bring a special kind of death to targets, typically killing things that are on the same level of power as itself. And now we come to the last unit, or the last unit type. The fortification slot, of which there is one fortification unit. It is the Hammerfall Bunker, often called the Hammerfail Bunker. In the Long War, it's actually pretty good. You are limited to one fortification slot normally, but one is enough. The Hammerfall is a durable AV-13 on all sides bunker, so it's pretty nice. It has a lot of weapons, and yes, its weapons are only ballistic skill 3, because they are manned by servitors, so it only hits on 4, but it makes up for it with having a lot of shots and a lot of guns. And the option to give it heavy flamers is fantastic in the Long War, especially since The Hammerfall is a fortification that can deep strike. And because of how deep strike works in a long war, the Hammerfall can actually be used aggressively to get work done. It's not fancy, but it doesn't suck. And while it's a little on the expensive side, you underestimate this thing at your own peril. And with specific allegiances, it can be really even better. Which is what we will now talk about. As we move into the final part of Codex, we're going to talk about the allegiances. So, let's move into the allegiances, which are going to require some explaining. So, allegiances are these sub-faction special rules and chapter tactics, similar to those that you see in 8th edition, 9th edition, and even 7th edition. And they work by swapping your chapter keyword with an allegiance keyword, which will then, each allegiance keyword gives an associated allegiance special rule. For example, allegiance, if you pick Dark Angels, you get the Allegiance Dark Angels special rule, which then has a series of sub-special rules. And each allegiance has 3 sub-special rules, which affect your army in various ways and allow you to skew into various different kinds of playstyles. The Space Marine allegiances work a little different from other factions, though. In the main codex, there are successor chapter rules. These are allegiances of playing successors to specific chapters. These allegiance rules are watered-down versions of the first founding chapter's allegiance rules. If you plan to play as a first founding chapter or a Codex Divergent chapter, a separate book supplement that is still in draft at the time of writing and recording this covers all the units, rules, and features of those chapters. The first founding chapters also have relic rules. As you might have noticed, Space Marines do not have access to generic relics in Long War. Relics are generally fewer and more powerful in this edition. Going over the allegiances themselves with an overview, first we have the Dark Angels. Dark Angel successors play much like better Marines. They take the core principles of the Space Marines army and allow you to play an improved version of them. They have a rather unique specialism for specific units to reflect their wings, which some successors may copy. The downside is that you will never have allies, and these benefits include mostly making your units much more durable and scarier than you would normally be, taking away your requirements to be near objectives to get bonuses, but it also causes you to sacrifice your ability to auto-regroup, so you become harder to shift, but once you shift, it's harder for you to rally back. Then you have White Scars. White Scars receive a speed boost. They are one of the harder successor traits to master, but focus firmly on making your units faster in every respect, with bonuses to normal, advanced moves, charge moves, and sweeping advances. They're also one of the few armies with the rare ability to attempt to seize the initiative, which can let them try and steal the first turn. You must field more fast than heavy choices, however, as a son of Chagoris. Space Wolves take the Space Marine core abilities and alter them a little. The Rout special rule replaces Angels of Death, and it means you have a better chance of winning combat, but won't have a chance to terrify and force the enemy to fail panic tests as much. However, the Rout applies to everyone no matter the leadership, making it overall a better bonus and better at taking combats, particularly. They also have counterattack and ensuring they always get their bonus attack even if they didn't charge, and they also get night vision in case someone tries to go for a night fight. Space Wolves are defensive fighters compared to chapters like Blood Angels, who are more offensive and aggressive. Blood Angels often, aim at a target and blitz them down, murder them all at once, whereas Space Wolves are much better at taking fights and forcing enemies back. Space Wolves cannot deep strike, which is fairly harsh as a penalty, which means you have to really work around delivering your units. Then you have Imperial Fists. Imperial Fists are masters of bolters and fortifications. They are the defensive allegiance by far. Both their traits rely on having a fortification, but so long as you have one, your army can gain the benefit of the Fury of the Chapter near it. The Last Wall makes your fortifications harder to destroy and turns your Hammerfall bunker into what is effectively an AV-14 fortification, which is nasty. And that will also apply to your drop pods. These guys love to dig in, but the nature of the Hammerfall bunker and the drop pod itself being a fortification lets you indulge in aggressive defense. After all, you can literally drop your Hammerfall and some Marines and drop pods down field on top of an enemy and fortify them to death right there. Imperial Fists must have a fortification, however, if they are allowed, and re-roll successful Feel No Pains as a downside. Blood Angels have what is, at first, a really basic trait, the Furious Charge 1. They want to blitz down targets normally, and are geared with fast-moving jump packs, which can help you get the charge, which will proc the Furious Charge that you get, to give you an extra attack on the charge. Being aggressive is what the Blood Angels want. A Blood Angels Terminator on the charge with 2 Lightning Claws swings with 6 attacks. So you can really, smash down targets and inundate them with attacks and tear them apart. You won't have to sweeping advance and cut down anyone who tries to escape. They'll already be dead, is your ultimate goal. The Red Thirst, the second part, is as much a curse as it is a blessing. Something that Blood Angels must control and conquer. The leadership test for the Red Thirst takes place every combat phase for units locked in combat, and will either help you ensure the enemy is destroyed with a +1 to wound and penetration rolls, or allow you to survive the combat better and lock down any surviving enemies to finish them off in the next combat phase, by making you, in a rather rare move, and it's really rare in the entirety of Long War, completely immune to panic. Blood Angels, as a downside to all this though, have to have more squishy infantry than vehicles in a lot of occasions. Then you've got the Iron Hands. Iron Hands all receive a 6+ invulnerable save from Bionics. This gives your army some level of protection and is better than light cover against the things that kill Marines. Your vehicles and walkers also receive a rare chance to bounce hits on a 6+ as well. While this is not a huge level of durability improvement on all Marines, Iron Hands also have a rare and powerful ability that lets them always overwatch no matter what. This comes at the cost of their weapons getting hot, however. But Marines don't hugely care about that, as we've already talked about. Iron Hands have a basic trait, but they are powerful. The 6+ invulnerable save doesn't look like much on paper, but it's essentially a free 5-point model upgrade across your army's infantry. Very few things are free in the Long War. The bite here is that you cannot retreat in the movement phase unless you pass a leadership test. Next are the Ultramarines. If Dark Angels are better Space Marines, Ultramarines are more flexible Space Marines. The basic buff increased leadership looks weak on paper, but the Long War puts a lot of emphasis on leadership and leadership tests. In addition, leadership is lower across the board for everything in the Long War, and very few things are immune to leadership. The extra leadership makes your Marines able to continue fighting at their best longer in spite of the odds. The second part of your Ultramarine Allegiance lets you divvy out a special rule that you need to a single unit in your army per phase. These add up and let you respond to what you need. Rerolls are rare outside of specific weapons, so access to so many, even though they have to be specialized rerolls versus specific targets, is very powerful. However, there are also movement-aiding special rules you can divvy out based on the tactical situation as well. Read, react, and respond, as per the Spacebook's suggestions. However, Spacebook also says your forces have to be organized in a certain way, taxing you units and limiting what you can field to force you into a Codex-compliant demi-company. Next, Salamanders. Salamanders are very simple, but it's also very powerful. The entire army is relentless. all of it. Now, the rules concerning moving and firing heavy weapons don't matter to you. That's incredibly strong. Neither do the rules about not being able to assault after firing rapid fire in heavy weapons. That is extremely strong. But there is a cost associated with this, like every other allegiance. Slow and purposeful means your army cannot perform advance moves, however. So you can never advance. You can only ever do your base normal move and retreat move. That means while you don't suffer penalties for moving and shooting, you are very slow. Fortunately, the second part of your allegiance gives you move through cover, which means you can't be slowed any more than what you already are. Finally, there's Raven Guard. Raven Guard is similar to Blood Angels in some respects. The basic Raven Guard units gain Fleet, which lets them advance and charge. This means that they can cover a lot of ground quickly and reach combat faster than their fellow chapters, essentially making them the exact opposite of the Salamanders. Jump Pack equipped Raven Guard get a further boost with an extra attack on the charge as well, which combos together very nicely, moving 12 inches, advancing an additional 4 to 6, and then getting an extra attack on the charge. Very nice. Compared to the Blood Angels, though, you don't have the same killing power or potential sustainability if combat goes badly, like they do from the Red Thirst. The Blood Angels' bonus attack is also universal to their entire army, while the Raven Guard bonus for Furious Charge is confined to units equipped with jump packs specifically. The Raven Guard do make up for this, though, by being sneaky. They can select 3 infantry units in their army that do not wear Terminator armor or Centurion armor to be able to infiltrate, letting them set up ambushes and get good positions with key units that would not normally be able to infiltrate. The Raven Guard, as the price for this, have limitations on vehicles and walkers and have to have more infantry as opposed. That is it for our overview on the Long War Space Marines Codex. Thank you for watching. Again, all of this is available for free. You can pick up the Long War. It's in the descriptions below. There is a dedicated Discord for it. There is a Facebook page for it where they post updates. They talk about things. You can pick up the rules for free from the Google Drive in the links below. You can play it and give feedback on those forums to help improve the game and iron out the rules, and really enjoy this as it's more of a throwback to older editions, keeping alive things but still letting you use the newer stuff without having to deal with many of the things that the newer editions baggage on. I've been Jay from JAAD Productions. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.